Welcome to Mental Makeover Radio, your go-to destination for meaningful conversations about mental health. I'm your host and your trusted therapist bestie, Cecilia Manella. Join us as we explore the complexities and messiness of human experience by addressing your questions and concerns. I'm here to provide a straightforward and practical therapy advice. So grab your favorite beverage, whether it's tea, coffee, or whatever tickles your taste buds, and get ready to embark on a mental makeover. Hello and welcome to Mental Makeover Radio. I'm your host, Cecilia Manella, and I am joined by Becky Ackerman today, who is a fertility coach. Becky has struggled with fertility for issues with herself and her own life for years and years and years, and came to the realization that mind-body connection is frequently overlooked, and it's also really important for the entire fertility puzzle. So she's going to join us today. We're going to dive into fertility stuff. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Becky.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, super excited to be here. How about we start with telling the listeners and telling us about where did the journey begin, and how did that all happen for you?
Sure. So it began pretty much the way everybody else's does. I'd been married for a few years, and we thought, okay, it's time to start a family, time to have a kid, and we assumed that it would be super easy. It was like, a year from now, we'll be parents and it'll be great. And then that did not happen. Right. And so, months started going by, and I kind of was like, I feel like something's not right. For whatever reason, be it impatience or intuition, I don't know, but I just sort of started to have this sense. So my doctor at the time, I know a lot of doctors, especially here in the States, well, and I think in Canada too, make you wait the full year.
A year.
They're a little bit, sometimes you can find a doctor who's a little bit flexible here. And so at 9 months, the woman that I was seeing said, okay, let's do some tests. And all the blood work came back great, but they did a hysterosalpingogram where they inject dye basically into your uterus, and it goes up into your fallopian tubes. And it showed that one of my tubes was blocked.
Right.
But she said to me, oh, I wouldn't do anything about that, because if we go in and try to do surgery, you run the risk, every time you do surgery, you run the risk of creating more scar tissue and creating more problems. Right. Okay. Turns out she had no idea what she was talking about. So shortly,
was this a doctor?
Or no, this was a doctor.
Oh, okay.
This was my OB, my gynecologist at the time. Right. And so shortly thereafter, she lost patience with me and sent me to a fertility specialist with the parting words, not said with a smile, I do not want to see you again until you are pregnant.
Wow.
So that was great. But
what was that like? This person who's supposed to be part of this process with you, who's supposed to be supportive and engaging, like, what was it like to experience that? Because I think a lot of women experience that.
I think you're right. And so there were two things. There was first the sort of, but this is your job. Like, why are you, like, what are you doing?
Right.
And then there was a second sort of, okay, I don't think she's the right one for me after all. Like, I liked her a lot at the beginning, but now we've been, and she's like losing patience, and that's not what I want.
Right.
So I went to see this fertility specialist that she sent me to. I was greeted. The receptionist handed me a welcome pack that had parenting and menopause magazines in it. And I had no idea what to do with that.
You're like, I'm here for fertility issues. How am I talking about menopause? Like, what is happening?
I was so furious. Furious, hurt. Like, it was one of those where you're like gonna try not to cry. And I was like, okay, I'm here. Maybe when I see her, it won't be this bad. I was pretty shut down for that appointment. I really don't even remember what we talked about.
Right.
I just was like, yep, this will be my last time here. Like, first and last, I'm gone.
Right.
So I found another gynecologist who's somebody who'd recommended. He was a really, really nice guy. Fertility was definitely not his thing, but he was like, let's try some medicated cycles. So we did, and it was basically just like stabs in the dark. He wasn't monitoring or anything. So like we had no idea what was, if anything, was going on in my body. But after 3 or 4 cycles, he was like, okay, I'm sending you to somebody else. And he gave me the name of another fertility doctor. And it turns out that guy was the guy.
So how long is that process? So we know from the moment of starting to like,
we're at 3 years. We're at 3 years in now. We're at 3 years in. Okay. And yeah. And part of that, I mean, part of it was because she had said, you know, I don't really think that there's anything wrong. Like your tube is maybe a little blocked, but you've still got this other tube. And so I was kind of like, all right, well, we're just going to keep going. And my husband at the time traveled a lot for work, and I was busy working. And, you know, so going to doctor's appointments wasn't super high up on my list until it got to the point where it's like, okay, there's clearly, I'm not going to get pregnant. So we went to the new guy who reran all the tests, and all the blood work was still fine, but he did another hysterosalpingogram and it came back again showing that it was blocked. And he said, the only thing to do now is surgery. There's nothing else that we can do before we move on. So I went in, and he found that I was completely full of endometriosis, which was a huge surprise because I never had any symptoms ever.
Right.
So he found endometriosis. He found like a walnut-sized fibroid that we had no idea existed. And
you had no symptoms?
No, none of it.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, endometriosis is like a really sneaky thing.
Yes.
Like it presents in all different sorts of ways or not at all. And then my left fallopian tube was completely filled with fluid. Wow. So he came out in the middle of the surgery and asked my husband for permission to just take it out. Now, I had, before I went in for surgery, told my husband that nobody could take anything out because
you're like, leave all my parts in,
please. Because in my mind, I was like, oh my God, he's going to find that like I'm full of uterine cancer and he just wants to do a hysterectomy and I don't want that happening without me knowing. So, you know, my husband said, no, she said, don't. So like, you can't. And so he drained it and he pinned it and told me that we probably had anywhere between 6 months to a year before it filled up again. Okay. So he said, but it's open and it's clear now. So go try for a few cycles. And if nothing happens, come back and we'll do an IUI. Right. So nothing happened, of course. And so we went back, went through the first IUI where I ovulated spontaneously before they could give me the trigger shot. So that was a bust. And then...
Just so everyone knows what is IUI.
So IUI is intrauterine insemination. It's like the turkey baster, if you will.
It's a professional.
It's a professional turkey baster.
Yes.
Yep. So in the middle of the second round, I was in for monitoring and he's looking on the ultrasound monitor and he's like, what? Oh yeah, your tube's filled up again.
That fast?
Yeah, it took like 6 months.
Wow.
December was the surgery. This was July. So a little more than 6 months. So in September, I went in for a second surgery to just have the tube removed.
Right.
At which point he said, it will probably now be difficult for you to get pregnant on your own. Okay, doctor's words go in ears and take root. Okay.
Well, it's also interesting because it's so dismissive. Like it's already been hard.
Right.
To get pregnant.
I mean, and keep in mind, I love this guy. I thought he was amazing. And so I was like, okay, but we're still going to try. I mean, I didn't really realize the extent to which I'd internalized it until later on. Because I was like, we're still going to go, like, I don't want you yet. We're going to go back and try on our own. Right. So we did for probably like 3 more cycles and nothing happened. So we went back for a couple more IUIs, which didn't do anything because I didn't respond to any of the medications. So I only produced like the one egg I would have anyway.
Right.
And we really sort of knew that we didn't want to go to IVF.
What informed that decision for you guys?
So it's not a sure thing by any means. And I know that we talk about it, and the number of people who you hear about going through IVF and the number of people who you know who've got pregnant through IVF, we've kind of taken it like as, oh, IVF, I'll just go do that. But it's really not that. The odds are still, they're better than they were. They're better than they were when I was doing this, but they're still not great. So I was like, I can't see us spending all this money for something that isn't a sure thing. And so then that's like double heartbreak, because now we don't have a baby and we're out all this money. So, you know, had things not eventually taken the turn that they did, we may have come back to it. But at that moment, I knew I wasn't interested. And as it turned out, we found out that my husband was being relocated for his job. And so I said, okay, we've got 6 more months here. We were living in Puerto Rico at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, we've got 6 more months here, and I just want to be able to go to the beach and enjoy my life. And we're done for now. So, you know, we told the doctor goodbye, and he was like, yeah, I get it. And he was like, but don't, you know, come back to it at some point. You should come back to it. So we moved up to New York, and about a month after we got here, I decided, okay, I'm going to do this very differently. I'm going to try, to go a more holistic, natural route. So I found a woman.
Tell me about what was your mindset like at that point? I mean, you had years of doing it in one way.
Yeah. So it's interesting. My mindset right at that moment was, I don't have the stomach to do any more traditional fertility stuff. Like I felt like I really couldn't. I was exhausted
out from it.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievably draining.
It's rigorous.
It's rigorous and it's all consuming. It really is. And so I found a woman who does Mayan abdominal massage. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically a manipulation, like a manual manipulation of your uterus and your fallopian tubes and your ovaries to make sure that everything's lined up as it should be. And everything is, you know, working well. Mm-hmm. So I did that. She also...
How'd you find her?
Google.
How does anyone find a Mayan?
Google. It's funny. I don't remember how I even heard about Mayan massage. Probably also from Googling, like, what on earth else could I possibly try? And so then I found this woman who did it, and I went to see her, and she kind of dabbled in herbalism and a little bit in acupuncture. So I did a little bit of that with her. But at the same time, the day that I went to the public library to get a library card for the first time, I walked in, and I'm not even joking, sitting on like the end cap of the first row of shelves was this book that was called something like Hypnosis for Fertility or Hypnosis and Infertility. And I was like, oh, maybe I should check that out, which I did. And then because I had, you know, all of the same thoughts and assumptions about hypnosis as most people who have never had any experience with it, I came home and I hid the book because I did not want my husband to see it. But I read it, and to his credit, actually, once he found out, he was like, fine.
Whatever.
Yeah, like, great. So then I found a hypnosis practitioner who listed Hypnosis for Fertility on her site. Right. And I started seeing her. And that was
about that book that made you decide to go to pursue in person.
What
was it about that book?
Talking about there were a couple of things, and I wish I've never been able to like find this book again. Talking about the fact that your mind, it was really talking about the fact that your mind has a bit of control over what your body does.
Right.
And I had, So back to the mindset, I will tell you the one other piece is that way in the back of my mind, there was always this little voice going, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. Like, there's really no problem here.
Right.
But I didn't quite know how to like access that.
Right.
And so that was sort of one of the things that she helped me with, was kind of the belief that, well, maybe there really is nothing wrong. And maybe your body really does know what to do. And maybe if you just chill out a little bit, your body could do it. I mean, it's a terrible thing to say for all you ladies who are listening.
Yeah.
I know that the advice you hate the absolute most is just relax, but there's so much truth. And not just relax in the sense that, you know, great aunt what's her face says, you know, oh, go take a weekend in Mexico. Like, but learn how to really relax. Makes a huge, huge difference. So I saw this woman for like, I think 6 sessions. And then I went to see an acupuncturist, at which point my mother was like, wow, you are getting really desperate if you're going to let somebody stick needles in you, because I am not a needle person. And so all this happened. We moved in June. In February of the next year, I got pregnant. So it was almost 6 years. It was 6 years to the month from when we had started trying that I got pregnant.
That's quite the journey.
Yeah.
Like, that's a long time. And by that time, you're probably like a fertility specialist and educator, because you've had to learn so much and research so much and do all the background information to get informed. Like, I think that's, you know, 6 years is a long time.
6 years is a long time.
And especially because we think that it's going to be so easy. Because we're taught that, right? Like, we're taught, like, don't have sex, don't have unprotected sex. You're gonna get pregnant. Teen pregnancies through the roof, and we talk about it that way. But, you know, the reality is like the actual, like, the probability of sperm and egg meeting and forming like an embryo is so small. Yeah. When we talk about it like it's so easy.
Big. In like a healthy, perfectly fertile 25-year-old, in any given cycle, it's only 20%. And then as you get older, that number goes down, which is why they tell you to wait for a year, because it takes time sometimes. Even when there's nothing wrong, it takes time.
Right.
So, yeah. So then just the little bit more where the aha really hit was when I was trying to get pregnant with my second one. I got pregnant immediately, and then I miscarried immediately. And I thought, well, not a big deal. I got pregnant so fast this time. It'll happen again really fast. 15 months later, I still was not pregnant again. And one night it just hit me. Why am I not doing any of these meditations or any of the visualizations that I learned the first time when I worked with the hypnosis practitioner? So I started doing them, and I was pregnant my next cycle. And so for kid number 3, I started doing them before we were even ready. And then I got pregnant immediately.
Right. It's such an interesting, like, connection between mind and body, because as much as we know that whole just relax and just take it easy and just calm down, I think what we don't understand, and we're not educated in, and we have to find this out through different sources, is like the role of cortisol, so our stress hormone, on pretty much everything in our body. And we don't talk about it. We don't educate people on it. Like, I find that all the time. I'm always educating women and clients on it, because if your cortisol levels are so high, so if your stress is super high and your cortisol levels are high, we're cavemen, right? Like, at the end of the day, we haven't really evolved that much. Our brain thinks we're living in in World War III, in the middle of World War III. So why would it even, it just is not prepared to have a baby. It's like, no, we're not doing this because the world is not safe. Right. And we don't, and we can look really functional and go to work and do all the things. You're like, I'm not that stressed. What are you talking about? Like, I sleep fine, and I run, and I work out, and I do all these things, and I get a facial, and like, I'm not that stressed. But we don't really realize that cortisol is like the biggest like influencer on how our internal bodies actually function. So it makes so much sense to me. And we get so ramped up in our minds and obsessive when when women are trying to get pregnant. Like, and it's a lot of pressure because it's really like all on women.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
and
like men are easy to measure,
right.
You're like,
yes,
see me in the cup,
here you
let's see
go.
what's
Let's
going
test
on.
it. Right. Yeah.
Just like that, right? I mean, in women, it's like, well, your system is really complicated and it could be this, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, or maybe it's.
And even when the man is the problem, right, the treatment is still for the woman.
Right. Oh, just drive me absolutely bonkers.
It's a whole thing. And in our society is we're a high cortisol society. Right. Like, we value that sort of thing. Like, go, do.
Hustle culture, get the things done, be on your phone 24/7, doing the scrolling thing, whatever it is, posting your life, so it is really super high levels of cortisol, which is interesting because I do know that research shows that we are having the highest rates of fertility issues in any time in history, any generation is right now.
Yeah, and they're going up. It's documented. Like, every year, it's more.
Mm-hmm. It's becoming a bigger issue.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you work with women who are going through the fertility process around this mind-body connection.
So what I do, the first thing that I like to do is just relaxation, pretty literally. Like, let's give you some strategies. We go through some meditations. We talk about breathing. We talk about situations that trigger them and how they can either avoid them, or if they can't avoid them, what can they do when they're in those situations to take some of the bite out of it.
Right. What are some common situations do you find with the women that you're working with that can be like triggering situations?
Well, family, like sisters or brothers who have small children is a really big one.
That makes sense.
And then there's the other phenomenon, which I think is pretty common for everybody who's going through this, is that, like, all my friends are having babies now and I'm not. And so I can't possibly go to another baby shower, and nobody's inviting me to come out anymore because they all want to just talk about their babies. And so here I am in my corner all by myself.
You just like lose that connection, or like friendships evolve and change.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can be quite lonely, I think.
It can be very lonely.
Yeah. And I would imagine too, I hear a lot of women talk about the pressure from their moms, especially, like, I want to be a grandma. When are we going to be grandparents? Right. And every family dinner, every birthday, every gathering is like, well, sure be nice to be a grandma. Sure be nice to be a grandpa. And that kind of like generational pressure.
Yeah. I feel like I hear about that a little bit less. I hear mostly about parents who are like there, but not there. Like, or like there's already another grandchild from a sibling. And so they're kind of not very invested in what's happening.
Yeah, they're kind of checked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And so you have a bit of approach. We chatted before this podcast about having 4 C's that you can help women with. Tell us about the 4 C's, what they are, and how we can engage in them.
So my 4 C's are calm, confident, in control, and clear. And by that, I mean, calm, obviously, relaxed, but not in the sense that like you're on an island vacation every day, because that's, lovely though that would be, that's just not real life. So it's more about learning the strategies to keep yourself from spiraling out of control, to keep you sort of at a baseline level. Confident can mean many things. You can feel confident in your body that you can get pregnant. However, for some women, when you've been at this for a really long time, and everybody's situation is different, and some women know that they are going to have to use an assisted technology to get pregnant. So it can be confident that your body knows how to respond to medication. It could be confident that I'm taking the right steps to move me forward. Or it could even be confidence that at the end of the process, regardless of whether you have a child or not, when your fertility journey ends, you will be okay. And
that's such a big one.
I think that's a really big one. that life
It's like
goes on. Your fertility journey does not last forever. And I absolutely promise that even if you don't think that you could possibly live your life without a child, there is always something on the other side.
Yeah, I think having that confidence that you're going to be okay. And part of that, because what I do in therapy is this idea of like your identity is not just about being a mom, like as much as you want to, and it's not judging about that, but there's more to you than this one piece. And if it happens, that's amazing. And if it doesn't happen, like your life can still be amazing. It just may look different than maybe what you planned it was going to look like.
Yeah.
And like you're still a person with dreams and desires and wants and needs and goals and all the things, even if the fertility path doesn't work out in the way that you want it to.
Yeah. And sometimes that confidence even just includes, I know that there are other ways that I could be a mom.
Right.
And I'm open to that. If I feel so strongly, I can be open to exploring some other avenues to becoming a mom.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's calm.
So that's calm, confidence, in control. Because when you're struggling with infertility, I mean, I always felt like I was just running, is really how it felt in my chest a lot. Like I'm just constantly going and I'm trying this and I'm trying that. And, you know, and I think a lot of us do that without even taking into consideration that when you try something, you have to actually stick with it for a period of time for it to work. You can't just like start out at the beginning of a cycle and then get your period at the end and go, oh, well, that didn't work. I'm going to try this now. Because change takes time. You know, your eggs need time to mature. Your brain and body need time to talk to each other. So,
but I imagine that that's actually really common because we're constantly jumping to the next best thing. Like if this doesn't work, then I want the next thing that maybe works, or so-and-so told me about this thing, so I'm going to try that thing now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that piece of, in control, knowing what steps you want to take, and also, looking at the things that you actually can control versus the things that you're worrying about that there's absolutely nothing you could do to influence. And so, you know, trying to focus your decision making in the places where you actually do have some control and letting the rest of it just kind of go to the best of your ability.
Right. What are some things that women actually have control over versus things they don't have control over?
Your doctor is a big one.
Oh, good one.
I have talked to so many women who, and most of them are now on the other side, these are the women who sort of come out of the woodwork and say, yeah, I was working with somebody and I stuck with them way longer than I should have. And I knew it the whole time. We just didn't, you know, I just didn't feel any sort of connection. I didn't appreciate the care. And I finally switched. And that was when the cycle worked. Yeah. So I think that's a big one. You've got to know that when your mind is telling you these things, it's so important to listen because it knows.
And that relationship is so intimate with your medical practitioner, especially through fertility process, right? It's like it's very clinical in the sense because they're, you know, physicians, but it's also like very intimate in the sense they're along with the ride with you. And if it's not a good fit, and then you're nervous about every single appointment and you're not really buying into it and your body's reacting to like, oh, I don't think this is the right person for me, or I don't like how they said this, or I think they're very judgy, or whatever it is, that has to get in the way of not only just the process, but probably the success of the process.
I would imagine. There are studies that exist that show that it's not really the quality of the care that you get. Like, it's not important that your doctor graduated from the top of his class at the best university. It's important that you connect and that you feel like you're really being cared for.
Right. What other things do women have control over?
So you do have control over your treatment. You know, when your doctor says to you, well, I think this is the perfect time for you to try IVF, and you don't want to, say it.
Say no.
You know, you totally have control over that. Nobody can make you do anything that you don't want to do. You have control over whether you go to that baby shower or not.
Right.
You really do. It doesn't matter if you offend someone or they feel a little bit hurt or they don't understand. Who cares? I mean, who cares?
Who cares?
Who
It's all
cares?
about boundaries, putting limits on what you're going to spend your energy into and how you're going to conserve your own energy.
Yeah. So lots of things like that. I mean, you don't have control over ultimately what inside your body is happening.
Right.
You know, you can't open yourself up and be like, okay, little sperm, there's the egg, go find it. I mean, you know, that'd be great and all, but
if only.
if only.
Life would be so much easier.
Yeah.
All right. And what's the last C?
The last one is clear and
Clear, okay.
or clarity. And that really just means sort of having a path laid out in your mind that, you know, so I'm gonna see this doctor and we're gonna do these things. And if this doesn't work, then my next step is maybe we go from IUI to IVF, or maybe I switch clinics. Or maybe I'm gonna take a break next. You know, just having sort of a path in mind so that it's not because I like to say that, like, it feels sometimes like you're swimming underwater in a muddy lake. And so if you can have some idea of where you're going, it can sort of clear that up for you a bit, and it just feels better.
How does someone create clarity when they've never even been through this process? They don't even know how to map this out.
So a lot of talking, and it's a lot of gut feeling. Really, like, these are the things I'm okay with and these are the things I'm not. So let's pick from the menu of things that you're okay with. And sure, it can be flexible. It's not a rigid path, but just so that in your mind you have some idea of what your next step is. So it's not like I'm going to do this and it's going to fail and then, oh my God, what next?
Right. Yeah. And I would imagine that talking to other women who have been through it is probably very helpful as well.
Sometimes it is. You know, it's interesting. Every woman kind of feels differently. Some women don't want to talk to anybody about it.
Interesting.
And other women, I mean, obviously the women I talk to want to talk about it, but, you know, somebody tried to refer me the other day to a friend, and she said to me, she's like, how do I make them come to you? I was like, you don't. You absolutely don't.
Yeah.
And for some women, it takes a really long time. Like, I didn't even occur to me to go talk to somebody until I'd been at it for 5.5 years.
Why do you think that is?
Because of the way it's set up. Because medicine, physical medicine and mental medicine, we've put into two separate envelopes, and they don't mix. And it's too bad, because there's so much power in the one. And, you know, for some fertility clinics are getting better at offering like counseling services and meditation services and yoga and that sort of thing. But by and large, we go to a fertility clinic when we're having trouble, which, I mean, logically, that is where you go. But they've got a very specific toolkit, which I'm fine and great. That's what they've been trained to do. But that's what they're going to offer you, because that's what they know to offer you.
Right. Right. And it's also Western medicine. Like, I think we need to remember that too. It's a very Western approach. It's very individualistic. It's very, something's wrong with your body. Like, I imagine there's no conversation about environment or relationships in your life or other things in your life, or like, everything is very Western. And I think we forget that there are very ancient approaches that have been around way longer than Western medicine that have been helping women get pregnant for thousands of years. Right. And perhaps there's knowledge in that, and perhaps there's wisdom that we can kind of ascertain from that.
Yeah. I mean, Chinese medicine, like,
yes,
billions of Chinese people can't possibly be wrong. I mean, like, it just doesn't make sense.
Right. And so I think we get very narrow, like our view gets very narrow, and we only focus on one thing. And I hope what people get out of this conversation is to open up a little bit their eyes a little, to see the peripheral things. Like, there are different things to engage in and different things to explore to get to a place where you're not frustrated with your body. Because what I find with women is they come and they're like, my body's betrayed me.
Yeah.
Or like, I hate this. I feel like I'm broken. Like there's this one thing I'm supposed to be able to do is to get pregnant and have a baby. And that it's not happening. Like, I feel like I'm broken inside. You know, we take it so personally and we make it about our value and our worth and who we are on this planet, because you're right, because we treat like physical health and mental health as these two separate buckets, when in fact, you can't have one without the other.
Right.
Like you can't have physical health unless you've got a brain. Like that's part of this piece here. And we can't talk about mental health without talking about the body, because that's where everything exists. And so I think that, you know, other, you know, approaches, let's say, you know, Eastern approaches are very much intertwined. They don't even talk about the body and the mind being separate.
Right.
It is just
the thing.
Like
it's one thing.
Your whole being. Right. And we have this like unfortunate space of thinking about them separately when they actually need to be put together.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Because it's so unbelievably powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And once you see it and you kind of go, oh, then it's a game changer.
It for sure is. Yeah. So if someone was listening to this and they were just at the front end of their potential journey of trying to get pregnant, what are like your top 2-3 words of wisdoms or tips?
So if you're just starting out, my very first thing is be patient. Be patient. Because like we already talked about, your chances in any given cycle are not very great. And you can sort of put yourself in a mental hole long before you need to be there. When 2 months go by and you're not pregnant and why am I not pregnant? There must be something wrong. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to wait a year to go see a doctor.
Right.
2 months hasn't told you anything. So just keep going.
Especially if you're coming off birth control.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's the other thing.
Add lots more months.
Right. Like if you've been on birth control, like for a lot of women get birth control like 13, 14, 15 to manage like irregular period cycles or really heavy bleeding. And then let's say you're like 28, 29 trying to get pregnant. You're just coming off birth control. You've been on it for over 10 years. Like your body doesn't just like come right back the instant you stop taking the pill. And we have to be a bit more patient with our body for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a big one.
Not to say that some women don't get pregnant right, because there are women.
Sure, there are women who do. Absolutely. Just like there are women who are jacked up on stress who get pregnant immediately.
100%. It's just
everybody's different. Yeah.
So patience. So what would be your next?
Be patient would be one of them. My next one would be once you know with some reasonable certitude that there is a problem, find a support system, you know, and if you've got great friends and family who are there for you, that's fabulous. That's and you don't want to look beyond that. That's fine. But if that's not working, find someone or someone's, because you're going to want them. It's too much to do by yourself. And even I will just say it's too much to do with just your partner. Because they're not always in the same place as you are. Right. When it's your body, it's
100%. You're
so, that's another biggie. And you know, if you've gone a full year and you're not pregnant, go see someone for sure. I would never say to a woman who hasn't gotten pregnant after a certain period of time that they should just try doing mind body work without having seen a fertility specialist.
They have to work together.
You have to
find out, because there are health issues, and you're right. Like sometimes there's stuff going on and we don't have any of the symptoms.
Right.
But you may not be having the symptoms today, but like give it some time and it might turn into a bigger problem. So the investigation part is like really helpful around catching things early or understanding what's happening in your body.
Yeah.
Yeah. The support is really, really important. Yeah. That's so great. Becky, where can people find you? Where do you hang out? Can they spend time with you?
I hang out on the tennis court. No, I'm kidding. But if you want to come play. No, so my website is www.lily, Lily, like the flower, and Bee, like the buzzing insect, fertility.com. And my email is just Becky@lilyandbeefertility.com.
That's fantastic. I'll add that into the show notes for sure. Yes. So before we go, I have a traditionalist podcast where the previous guest leaves a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest is. Okay. So the question that was left for you is, what is something people would never guess about you just by looking at you?
That my major in college was geology.
Oh, no way. What?
Yep. I wanted to be a paleontologist. I think dinosaurs are just the most awesome thing ever. Yep. So
that is so fascinating.
So I was a geology major, and then my first job out of college was actually my dream job, working at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. It was right after, I'll date myself, you can go look it up. It was right after they'd bought Sue, the T-Rex. And so I worked on that exhibit. Yeah.
Wow. What a pivot. From dinosaurs to fertility.
There was a layover in fitness in between.
Sure,
a long layover. Yeah.
That is absolutely fantastic. Becky, thank you so much for your time today. I know people are going to love this, and I hope everyone listening goes and finds our website and gets some information from you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
This is so good. Bye, Becky.
Goodbye.